Okay, good evening. Notice is hereby given that in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, the laws of 1975, notice of this meeting has been sent to all school offices, officially designated newspapers, filed with the Township Clerk, and posted in the Board of Education office 48 hours in advance of this meeting. Roll call, please.
Certainly. Mrs. Berkowitz?
Here.
Mrs. Pintarelli?
Here.
Mrs. Rothenberg?
Here.
Mrs. Sanande?
Here.
Mr. White?
Here.
And Mr. Rossini?
I'm here. Okay, flag salute, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so we're here for our board retreat, starting, at this time, and now I'm going to move on to a few of the items, and we're going to talk about the purpose of the retreat. Do you want to talk about that, Melissa?
All right, good evening, everyone. So the purpose of the retreat is to really come together and do a little bit of a reflection of some of our goals and initiatives that we did this current year, and then to really take a deeper dive into next year and what goals and initiatives we believe would be most valuable for in a couple of different areas. We're going to be looking at students, learning and achievement, communications, operations, technology. And so it's a time for us to sort of present out to you what we believe is going to be the most beneficial, and a time for the board to be able to reflect on those proposed goals, ask any questions, and give us any feedback. And that will really help sort of what I like to say, set the roadmap for next year. And you will see in the presentation that some of the goals will continue and double down on some of the current things we were doing, as well as some proposed new stuff. And so that's going to be coming up in a little bit. And would you like me to also do the next one?
So the next part, there's really three parts. There's the review of the functions. The next part is the review of functions of a Board of Education. And then finally, we're going to be developing the Board of Education goals, as Melissa just briefly alluded to. But part two is the review of functions of a Board of Education, and maybe you could let us know what
Sure.
to
So
expect.
we've done a bit of information and training on this already this year, so you should all be pretty familiar with basically the role and function of a Board of Ed and the role and function of the superintendent. But what we did is in your packets, you should all have a pamphlet that says who does what in public school governance. It's just a good reminder. Again, a lot of those things in there you may already be familiar with the Stephen Fogarty training that we had, as well as the training we've had from Matt Lee from school boards. And it's just a good reminder to, especially when you're setting goals, to think about your role as a board member of basically making sure the schools are run well, and then the goals are really going to be sort of the nitty-gritty of what I get into along with my team and how we make that happen. So put a pamphlet in there. You certainly can read it at your leisure. No need for us to go through it sort of topic by topic, especially because we've already had 2 formal trainings this year. So just remember that's in there, and certainly take a look at it when you get a chance. Other than that, we can go right on to the presentation of goals. Okay?
All right, thank you.
All right, testing. Good. Okay. So we put together this presentation. You also have a printed out version because it might be a little small reading it up there. But the first goal, if Ms. Dowling can be so kind and switch to it, is really going to be all about student learning and achievement. And I'm definitely glad I have a paper copy because my eyes are not good enough to read that up there. Okay, so first of all, I do want to, I just read a very interesting article that came out before I go into the goals. It was from New Jersey Education Report, and it was data on something called iReady. iReady is another universal screening similar to Renaissance, similar to Linkit, which is what you've heard us use. iReady is just another tool. There's about 200 school districts in New Jersey that administer iReady, and there's about 1,700 students that take this iReady benchmark. And what iReady did is they looked at students that took iReady for 2 years in a row before the pandemic and then administered it again this school year. And they started to just get some preliminary data of what student achievement looks like in New Jersey. So we've been sort of keeping our eye on all of this data that's been coming out. So that's local data that just came out. And the data that iReady was showing was that the students who took iReady for 2 years in a row pre-pandemic compared to those same students that took it this year, which we'll kind of call post-pandemic, even though we still had COVID challenges with remote learning for those who had to be quarantined. And the data is showing that 58% of students were reading 1 to 3 years behind than what they were reading before the pandemic, and 68% of students were 1 to 3 years behind in math. Now that's one sample, so we always say, right, we have to look at multiple measures. There's also data that came out on a national level from the Director of Educational Research from Harvard University that collected some national data with a couple of different platforms looking at things like Renaissance and iReady and put that together. And that data is showing similar results. So why do I share this with you? Not to be a big downer, but because it's our job to always be proactive and trying to think forward. Because if we wait for all our data to come in, we have now lost a year of what we could have been doing proactively. And I think you heard that theme when Ms. Dowling and I presented in the fall, and we kind of went back and said, hey, let's look at our NJSLA data before the pandemic. We didn't have really anything to compare it to recently, so we just said, let's look at Renaissance because we do have that. And even before that data came out, we had to just assume that some learning was impacted in some way with the disruption of COVID. And so that's why last year we put in the Summer Learning Academy just to be proactive to see, okay, how can we start to catch these students up with any of the standards from the previous year when we were in remote that whole time in March of 2020? And what are some other things that we could have done proactively this year, even though we just took and are currently taking the NJSLA, but we won't get those results until this school year is over. So again, we have to kind of assume, make some educated guess, and then be proactive. So you're going to see a little bit of that in these goals, and also why we did what we did this year, okay? So if you think about what we did starting really for this school year, I count last summer all the way up until this summer. So we started with that Summer Learning Academy. We started by implementing our new math series, which is Big Ideas. We worked this year with a math consultant and literacy consultant to really help our teachers not only increase the rigor in their lessons, but also how do you help them with language that they might have missed during the pandemic? How do you look at the language of the NJSLA? And how do you give our teachers some more support? Because if this data that's kind of preliminary coming out from a national level and a state level is in fact what we end up seeing, right? If our data from Rivervale matches what national and state level is doing, we have to make sure that we give our kids every chance they can get, but it's not going to take one school year to make up for 2.5 years of disrupted learning, but we have to start. So that was some of the things, and we put in this year, we obviously increased our grammar with a grammars program. We also, even before the pandemic, we really kind of honed in on phonics instruction. So we started doing a lot of these things proactively anyway. And so you'll see some of that being continued because it's just year one. And again, it doesn't take 1 year to get everybody back on track. You've got to sometimes do multiple years. So you'll see a lot of that in student learning. So let's talk about the first one, keeping in mind some of that data that I just shared with you guys. So the first goal is students will engage in rigorous mathematical content tied to the NJSLS, that's the New Jersey Student Learning Standards, to improve progress in mathematic achievement. So math has been an area of focus of ours. And what we've really done this year is try to double down on that with our new math series. We also implemented a new math program this year for basic skills instruction as well. And we also had the math consultant work with our teachers. We want to continue that, right? So underneath this goal, you'll sort of see sort of sub-goals. So the first one is further develop targeted instruction and mathematics through data analysis. Our new series is going to help us do this a lot, because our new series has cumulative benchmarks, which is very different than the former series, which basically you would have chapters 1, let's say you were assessed on chapters 1 through 3, and then you'd go and you'd be assessed on chapters 4 through 8, let's say, but it didn't spiral. Our new math series spirals, so you're always revisiting those same skills and those same standards, because math builds upon each other. So you've got to have the foundation, and then you use that to do long division, and then you use that for algebra, and so forth and so on. So now we really, now that we've piloted last year the math series, this year implemented it, now we really want to double down on using all of those components, really looking at those math benchmarks, looking at how well are our students retaining the skills and content from chapter to chapter, which is where that spiraling comes in a little bit. And then, of course, we're going to continue to utilize Meredith Alvaro, who is our math consultant this year. And she's focusing on developing best practices in lesson instruction and design, but also tying that to the language we see on standardized tests. And that's an area that we found in our own digging of our own research, is that our students know the standards and they can perform it. They might get tripped up, though, on the way the question is proposed. So we're doing a little work around that as well, and something we want to continue for next year. And then you can see number C, implement year 2, which is what I was just talking about, of the big ideas, and also bridges. So that's something brand new that we felt was really important, especially coming off of the climate we've come off of, is that our students who are in basic skills, we always think of those students as like, they're in that safety net right now. Those are your sort of students that could be at risk. They're not necessarily, they don't necessarily require or need special education, but they need some of those basic skill gaps to close. And those kids are the ones you really got to keep your eye on, because they might not be getting the full services of special education because they don't need that, but they do need something. And so we implemented Bridges, which is a program that has gotten great feedback and reviews this year. So we are doubling down on that next year. And then what I was speaking a little bit about before is really utilizing those quarterly benchmarks that our math series now gives us, but utilizing that in conjunction with Linkit. You've heard us talk about Linkit probably all year. Linkit is more than just assessments. Linkit is like a whole data warehouse. And so we can input all of the data, TC levels, math benchmarks, plus their assessments and benchmarks. And what we started to do this year is Ms. Dowling started to put together like digital profiles, and she gives them to all the teachers. So at their fingertips, they can open it up and they can see a whole comprehensive view of their child's progress and really be able to start targeting instruction. So we need to really double down on that next year and formalize those structures. So that's really the whole first goal, and really tied a lot around math. The next one is enhancing professional learning through individual choice and continued peer-to-peer collaboration. So let me explain what that means. So these are PLCs, which stands for Professional Learning Communities. They are very valuable, but they are not easy to do. You have to build a structure for them to happen, and there is a formal structure for you to help teachers gain the most from them. We started to do PLCs a few years back before the pandemic. We want to bring that back. the more our teachers can work together and collaborate and study student data and talk about trends that they're seeing, the better our students will benefit. So we're going to bring back PLCs, and we have a couple of areas that the teachers are going to be focusing on. So core content, of course, SEL, and behavioral health. And so think about our whole staff, right? When we think about setting goals for next year, we can't just think of teachers. We also have guidance counselors in special areas and behaviorists, etc. So we have to think of the whole comprehensive package. And what we want to do is really build a sustainable structure to conduct these PLCs. And what that means is sometimes if you just say, okay, have a meeting and do a PLC, how do you know you're really making the movement you want to make? So we're going to build a sustainable structure where there's time carved out, there's a goal, and there's a focus. They're going to be using some of this linkage data. They're going to be using some of the math benchmarks. They're going to be using some of the behavioral health issues that we're seeing coming up in INRS and things like that. Setting goals, figuring out, okay, now that I've reviewed this data, where do we need to go next? And also articulation. Are they seeing that across the grade level? Is this something in our curriculum, in our scope and sequence? And also vertical articulation, which means, hey, third grade teachers, are you seeing this? What do you need the second graders to be more prepared with? So we're going to really formalize PLCs and also just promote professional learning through our teachers, something that we were really taking off with, like I said, before the pandemic. But then the pandemic hit and everybody got isolated. There was a saying years ago about, hey, teachers, open your doors, and they didn't, metaphorically speaking, like, don't hover and take your things and not want to share. And this isn't Rivervale. I'm not talking, I'm just talking, this was sort of a stereotypical thing. Like, they didn't want to share anything good. When the opposite is true, share the wealth, talk to each other. And the pandemic obviously just isolated everybody. Teachers had to work solo by themselves, even the camaraderie of sitting in the faculty room and having an informal conversation. So we want to get teachers back to getting out there, because the better we can support them and the more they can take part in professional learning, the better our students will benefit. So we really want to get all of that back, right? We need to keep our educators sort of top notch as well, and they already are. But it's been a really tough couple of years. So we need to help kind of arm them as well. All right, the next one. Thanks, Ms. Dowling. So you have heard this year one of our goals was to create, write, and complete several areas of curriculum. So social studies, science, visual and performing arts, comprehensive health and PE, world language, computer science, 21st century skills and careers. So this was a lot that the state sort of threw at schools where we were like, oh, welcome back to after the pandemic, and now we've got to rewrite all this curriculum. So now our goal for next year is implementing it. Now, I always used to say, implementation of new curriculum is sometimes more important than curriculum itself. And that's from my days when I was in a curriculum role. You could create a beautiful document, and if it sits on the shelf and collects dust and nothing actually changes in the classroom, we just wasted a whole lot of time and energy. So the implementation process is going to be big, especially when we have, typically you're implementing one or two content areas. We have a lot. So we've already been talking and thinking about creating implementation teams that will help to roll this out and help to turnkey to everybody else, creating the scope and sequence on how you do it, going unit by unit, so we help support and train teachers, let's say, on Unit 2, obviously before they implement Unit 2, so that they feel very well prepared in handling these new standards. And also, anytime you implement new curriculum, you also have to see what we call the implementation dip, or you also call it, and that's where if you have a teacher that hasn't done something before and it's brand new for them, they're not going to be such an expert in teaching it right away because they're brand new at it. That goes back to the PLCs and the professional learning communities and how do we support them on that. So that goal really outlines a strategic plan in how we're going to successfully roll out all of these new standards and make sure that our teachers feel supported and that it is in the best interest of our students. There's something else called curriculum compacting. So let's say there's a standard that used to be, I'm just making this up, in 3rd grade, and now it's been moved to a different grade. Well, now you got an issue. Does that mean all those kids, well, you just missed that standard because, sorry, they moved it and you don't get it now? No. You've got to what you call curriculum compacting, and you have to make sure that you strategically make sure those kids get that standard, and it's like a phased approach. So all that's going to be going on under that goal. We also have in there, to continue to collaborate with the Regional Curriculum Office, which they've been great and very helpful. We write curriculum as a region, which obviously benefits our students because they're all eventually going to go to the same high school, and we want them to have similar experiences. We also have students that move in and out of our towns. They might move from Hillsdale to Rivervale or Rivervale to Woodcliff Lake and so forth and so on. And so we have to make sure that there is some continuity for them as well. So that's where the regional office comes in. And then the other thing you have to do when you roll out new curriculum like this is you have to make sure like the resources you have, are they working? Are they current? Are now some obsolete? So those are the other things we're going to kind of be doing an audit of as we roll this curriculum out, okay? The next one is all about Linkit. You probably heard us talk about Linkit now for like, I don't know, a year or two. We are very pleased. We thought we were going to be very pleased, and then as we started to pilot it this year, we just kept feeling more and more confident about it. And so we are going to switch from Renaissance officially to Linkit for next year. Just as a reminder, Renaissance, although it was good for the tool we needed at the time, it is a nationally ranked assessment. And so New Jersey in general ranks very high for education in the country. So our students are generally going to rank very high on Renaissance. And I think we're just in different times now. We need something that's going to be more New Jersey specific, which is what Linkit's going to give us. So next year, we are going to administer Form A, B, and C. So like fall, winter, and spring. That also gets uploaded into that Linkit data warehouse that I was talking about earlier. So that's going to be helpful. Just give us a more comprehensive overview of our students' achievement. They also have this great tool that we love. It's a progress monitoring tool. Our teachers got a chance to play with it a little bit, towards the second half of this year, where the reports that Linkit gives you is really great. And you can know exactly what standards your students didn't do well on. You can teach them, reteach, assign them it again, and then you can see if they're making progress and growth. And that's another really important piece, especially for a district like Rivervale, who typically is a high-achieving district. It's very high to make growth. Right? If you're like a C student, it can get you to that A. But what if you're an A student? So we still want to make them have growth. So that's where that progress monitoring tool is going to come in really handy. And then really build the capacity of teachers to align instruction through analyzing the benchmarks, the assessment, the data, and the professional development opportunities, and getting a much more comprehensive view and being able to tailor that instruction. So like I said, teachers start to dabble in it a little bit, but next year it's going to be a lot of training for teachers, a lot of support, and the expectation is we use that tool a lot so we can really differentiate more so than just your typical classroom differentiation. So that's that one. So the social and emotional piece has been playing a larger role in our schools. It is probably no surprise that the mental health and social and emotional piece for our students has increased over the last few years and has certainly increased since we've been back from the pandemic. Everyone had a different experience, and some of our students did have a more difficult time adjusting back. So if you remember, it's year 3, but it's really year 2 for the students. Year 1 of Ruler was training the staff. This year was year 2, which we rolled it out to students. So students created common language, they created school charters, they had assemblies throughout the year on it. They started to get used to recognizing, understanding, labeling, expressing, regulating emotions, and really getting kids to a place where they're available to learn. Because when you have a student who comes in and they're very upset and they're frustrated and they shut down, you can't get to them academically. And so this has really been getting kids to start being able to say, you know what, when I go to math class, I always feel like I'm in this color. And what do I do now so I can get myself ready? So that's where the Ruler comes in. So next year is going to be year 2, really for the students, but year 3 for the district. And what we plan on doing, which is in there, which I really can't read that up there, is tying it into content. So next year, we're really going to be focusing on, okay, so if you're doing a reading unit and you're learning about characters and how characters change and develop over time, right? That's all literacy standards. But we're going to start tying this program into the content. So how does the character feel? What would the character identify with? What could that character do if they're feeling like that? So taking it off of the student, because it's sometimes hard, especially for little kids, to think about themselves, but they can certainly name it and express it with their favorite character. So starting to get all of that throughout the content areas is what we're going to start seeing with Ruler next year. And the next one is, we are going to be adopting the New Jersey Tiered System of Supports, which is NJTSS. So right now we have the INRS process. This is new. The state is asking districts to choose if they're going to do the New Jersey Tiered System of Supports or like RTI. We're looking for something with our INRS process that's more comprehensive than just RTI. RTI focuses mostly on the academic supports, but we've expanded our INRS on our own over the last couple of years to include behavioral health and behavioral supports. And we did that because we looked at our internal data of how many students were being referred to INRS for academic needs as compared to social, emotional, or mental health needs. And we started to see it flip. We started to see more and more kids being referred to INRS for that behavioral health piece. And so this New Jersey Tiered System of Support encompasses both academic and the behavioral health piece as well. It's a lot larger and more comprehensive. So we're going to implement that next year. And so we're going to have to provide some training to the appropriate personnel on that, inform the staff of the new system. We have to create some new district manuals around this system. And then we need to make sure we're tracking the effectiveness of the mental health supports that are implemented through the intervention and referral system, as well as the academic supports. So that you'll start to see come into play as well. And then we are going to also continue under the social and emotional learning with our partnership from Westburg and Mental Health. They have been an incredible partner with us. We were very fortunate that we got Westburg and Mental Health in actually before the pandemic, and they have certainly been busy over the last couple of years. They provide a lot of supports to our students. They keep our students in district more, which is always good. We always want our students to stay with us. They are able to do risk assessments for us, which again keeps kids in our schools more, gives kids support that they might need faster. They also have provided a lot of parent support for us. They also provide the warm line, which we've had both parents and staff access. And we actually increased their support this year and are going to increase it more next year. So for instance, one of the things and feedback we got is our staff was looking for some more support, especially after coming back off of the last couple of challenging years. And so we also provide support to our staff. They also have access to a clinical level therapist as well, should they need it. And our staff was also looking for some more targeted support and professional development on how can they best help their students by grade level. So one of the things, like, we would give, whole school or full district professional development from Westburg in mental health, but they had said, well, how you handle and how you support a first grader is very different than how you're going to support a fifth grader or an eighth grader. So that's something that we've been talking to Westburg about, how they're going to be able to come in and do some grade level support, and how a kindergarten is adjusting to school and what you can do to help them adjust better or be more successful, as opposed to maybe a fifth grader who's having a hard time coming to school, or an eighth grader. So we're going to sort of really increase that for our staff as well. And then communication. So this has been an area of focus that I really wanted to try to tackle when I got on in July 1st. So one of the first things, and it sounds silly, but it's a lot of little things that make a difference with communication. So one of the first things I did over the summer was just revamp the district newsletter. And that sounds silly, but I've been working a lot and reading a lot about effective communication and just making things more eye-catching. Nobody has the patience anymore. You send out an email and it's 5 paragraphs long and you're like, I'm running to the baseball field. And we're used to getting like news headlines and things like that. So I wanted to take the district newsletter, even things like switching up the pictures and having consistent sections in that newsletter, adding more photos, visually appealing. So we're going to continue with that. I shared this maybe in a committee meeting, that we were about, 40% in lower the first couple months of school of who opened my district newsletters, and now we're hanging out at around 80%. So that's really great. Also, too, the principals have been doing a great job. They've added more like videos to their e-blasts, more photos, anything that's going to grab somebody in and be able to give them a little bit more of a sneak peek into what's happening in the schools. So we're going to continue with that. And the other piece with communication is this year we redesigned the K-5 content area section of the report card. And you have to do that. You have to update report cards every now and then because standards change. And so your report card has to reflect your standards. So next school year, we're going to be focusing on the K-5 report card for special areas. So music, media, art, that kind of stuff. They need a rehaul now too. They've got some new standards coming out. And, after reflecting on them, they're not as, I don't think they're as transparent and provide the amount of information that we really could be providing. So that's going to be a big undertaking. We'll take the year to revamp that, write that, and then get that out the following school year. We'll put a team together of educators to do that. Any questions at all? Let me just pause here for a minute about student learning and.
Sure. Yeah, just a quick question. With regard to Link It, I'm glad it's working out so well as a diagnostic tool or whatever, however we use it for data. Are we the only sending district that's using Link It, or others?
In our region?
Yeah.
Are we? I think so.
Right. Right, and it seems like a good resource. So are we going to encourage other districts to are we going to be the leaders here and encourage other districts?
Well, I will say that some of the districts that didn't have any universal screening and have had conversations with us are adopting universal screeners for sure. I don't know, and I wouldn't want to say publicly what one they have kind of decided to land on yet, just because I don't know if they've informed their public. But yes, it is certainly conversations that we have with the region a lot, and it's a tool that, again, we were fortunate. We were kind of on the forefront with even adopting Renaissance, and we just feel it's time to update it. So I think, especially after the pandemic, you see more and more districts, not just in our region, but around the state, that are looking to adopt more universal internal benchmarks, like iReady or Linkit, something like
I mean,
that.
it seems very useful. If we're going to get A students even
Yeah.
better, this is a better tool, then I would think everybody should,
Yeah.
we should help. All right, that's really it. Okay, great.
Yes.
I'll stay with the Linkit topic for a quick second. You said that you're going to be administering it in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring. Springtime, how entailed is the assessment? I'm just thinking spring because of state assessments
Yeah.
as well. And I know a lot of kids this year were certainly stressed out, because they haven't taken
Yeah.
the tests and so forth. So
And the students this year, which, we didn't love either, but they had Linkit that they took because we piloted it.
Right.
But then they still had to take Renaissance because we didn't formally adopt Linkit, nor did we have a comprehensive picture of Linkit because we didn't do all the assessments. And then they had NJSLA. So next year, they won't have Renaissance, so that's going to eliminate 3 or 4 assessments right there. So in the spring, our goal is to administer it before NJSLA because it's supposed to be pretty predictive of how your students will do on NJSLA. So we want to administer it early enough that we then have time to intervene. And so what Linkit does is they have a team that goes and analyzes the tests, NJSLA, and they call them domain what do they call them? The main standards, priority standards, thank you. And they can say, like, look, NJSLA is very, very heavy with these standards. So you then want to look at your scope and sequence and say, oh, well, we don't usually teach those standards till June. Well, you might want to then adjust your scope and sequence because, again, you're not teaching to the test. Everyone's got to learn these standards. But if you don't, in your district, if you're not teaching it to June, that's not going to help with the test that's administered in May. So you would make some adjustments there. So yeah, so hopefully next year with the elimination of Renaissance, we every time we're like, oh, but it's just that's what happens in a pilot year sometimes. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not the full day. Like it's like 30 minutes. It's not like 6 hours a day. That's sitting there. Yeah, it's like, right. It's one period. It's like the same equivalent of like taking a math chapter test. It's one period that you have, and that's it. Yeah. Yeah. You may ask away. This is what this is for.
the student learning and achievement, everything sounds great. Would you guys consider doing some team teaching? Because now that the 3 schools have those awesome library with the larger rooms, at least I know at Woodside we have it since the construction a few years ago, a way to get teachers out of the classroom, especially with all the new curriculum. If you have more of a master teacher who knows the curriculum and the content, who can work with the teacher.
Yes, and we also encourage like going to visits, like to visit each other. So, let's say I go to your room, see how you do it, you come to my room. And we're also, the way we're utilizing our consultants next year. So this whole year was everybody come in, let me provide you with some of the professional learning. Next year, we're moving much more to a coaching model. So now the consultant goes in, maybe demonstrates how to implement something, but then the teacher does it with the expert next to them, sort of coaching in and helping them hone in on their practice. Right. That's our whole goal, is like get them out of being, they've been so isolated the last few years. We need them to start. And they, look, and when I tell you isolated, they collaborated. I mean, they were collaborating at 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night during the pandemic on Zoom. But we want to make sure we give them the structure so they're not having to do it at 10 o'clock at night. Yeah. Right. Right. The good news is Kim and I, our favorite thing is probably curriculum writing and implementation. So we're excited, even though it's like, hey, could have divided this up for us. You know, the state could have slowed down a little bit on it, but that's okay. No, they're trying to, no. Right.
And then my last question, what for communications, would you guys consider doing, or should we consider doing like a Rivervale School District app where it's just like a quick little, like parents can download an app and just get like quick little clippets of what the newsletter may say instead of it being.
I don't know. I haven't thought about that. I mean, I could send stuff out on our social media and say, hey, check out the newsletter. You're going to hear about, a sneak peek at next year and things like that. We could do, We
can talk about it. Like for a lot of the day camps, they have like these apps, and it's really convenient for a lot of information you're getting.
Right. Yeah.
Something to consider.
It's all good stuff. Anything else? All right. So then I'm going to pause. I'm actually going to pass it over to Miss Ippolito. Oh, I forgot one thing. We are also redesigning. Kim and I are going to be working on redesigning the curriculum page of the website this summer. Just make it a little bit more user-friendly. There's a lot to navigate on there, so we want to make it a little bit more easy for parents to navigate. And we also want to put together like a Did You Know page. I talked about it early in the year where we can kind of pull out and highlight. Like a lot of parents don't know, like, hey, did you know we have all these academies? Did you know we have these clubs? Did you know this is how our students are doing? Like things like that. So we're going to work on that too this summer.
Thank you. Ms. Dowling, could I? Okay.
Right?
Yes, I agree. It's very small. Yeah.
I can
So in terms of district goals for operations, some of these are continuing. We deal with them each year, like maintaining a safe and healthy environment for staff and obviously students. The annual budget, every year, we have to develop that in conjunction with goals for that the board has, make sure it's fiscally responsible for the community. And so I will have a draft budget to you by January 3rd of 2023. I can't even believe I'm saying that. Time's flying. Referendum. We are in the midst of the referendum. It is a multi-year process. We all know that we're dealing with the renovations here at Roberge, the addition at Holdrum, and the roof and the rooftop units at Woodside. So next year, we will be going out for bid for the second part of Woodside. That would be the classroom renovations, all the univentilators, the ceilings, the flooring. So we'll have to go out to bid for that, as well as with Holdrum. So part 2 will be coming next year. So that's an ongoing project, and it's planning and learning from any mistakes that we've made from these projects here at Roberge and Holdrum to make sure that we move that forward, and then revisiting the canopies. That's another item that we're going to have to revisit. We're also going to continue to assess district practices. It's always good to look around and say what's working, what's not working, what can we do to tweak it. Continue always to share services. What can we share? Throw out ideas. We do share with the township, also with Old Japan, so encouraging those relationships to grow so that we can all save money and time and effort. We are going to be looking forward to creating a policy regarding the use of air conditioning. Now that all the buildings will be air conditioned, that's going to be something that you're going to want to talk about. Prepare negotiations with the administrators, the principals, that their contract ends next year, so we'll put together with the negotiations team a strategy for negotiations. And then there's technology. So lots going on in technology. Big topic is to continue to improve the cybersecurity practices. Mr. Arguera, he went above and beyond this past year, and we implemented, and we will plan to increase the 2FA, MFA across all systems. Right now it's in the finance system, it's in Google, and it's in Genesis, but we have to do better because the bad actors are getting better, so we need to be ahead. Going to continue training. We work with our insurance, JIF, which is 43 school districts, so we have good resources, good professionals, so we leverage those. Also look to deploy 3 grade levels of new student devices. Grade 6 will receive a new device prior to the start of the school year. Grades 2 and 3 will receive new devices at the start of the school year. And technology. It's 1 director and 2 wonderful technicians are going to be labeling and preparing 375 new devices. It's a lot of work, a lot of effort, heavy lift. And then we're going to expand the one-on-one program to grades 2 and 3. Students in grades 2 and 3 will begin transporting devices nightly and communicate program expectations to the parents. Last but not least, we'll be developing a new handbook for elementary schools, one-to-one program. Establish standard operating procedures, add a handbook sign-off to the parent portal, and communicate program expectations to the parents. So it's a very ambitious goals that we have set. Again, developed with the Director of Technology and yourselves. So, Ms. Dowling, if you'd go to the... Anybody have any questions? Ms. Signori, anything else?
Yes, I just want to add, first of all, thank you so much, Kelly, because all of our ideas and goals and all the things that we dream about, we need a really good BA to make sure we can make it all happen. So I do appreciate that. And just to piggyback with the technology, I had mentioned it to you guys, but I just wanted to talk about it in public. One of the other things that we want to be proactive about is something called Tutor Me. And so that's something that we're looking into, and we're hoping we can get it where we're going to there's going to be a button either in Canvas or ClassLink that students for math after hours, so when they're home, they can click on this button, and within 60 seconds they'll be connected to a live tutor. And so that tutor can help them anywhere from a few minutes to just, oh, I'm stuck on this math problem, to I need help studying for a test, up to an hour. And so we think this is going to be a really great resource. And again, another way to just really be proactive and keep saturating the supports we have for the next couple of years as we continue to get in some of the data about the disruptions that our kids have been through the last couple of years. So once we kind of get that going and underway, Ms. Dowling and I will send the information out to the community and inform the parents on how to use it, but it seems like it's going to be pretty easy. They're just going to click a button and immediately be connected to a live tutor. So that's great. So that's another sort of little not a formal goal, but again, we have formal goals, and then we've got all sorts of other things we're working on as well. So that's one of them.
That sounds terrific. Okay, we're all done with the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, well, thanks. That was very good, very helpful, informative, and full steam ahead. So I'm going to move on to on the agenda to see if there's any old business that needs to be discussed. Any new business? Okay. So then I'm going to look for a motion to adjourn, because then again, at 7 o'clock, we'll go into our regular board meeting.
A motion to adjourn.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
Okay. All right, do you want to do a vote, or it doesn't matter?
I'll take.
All right, we'll vote, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Berkowitz,
On the motion to adjourn.
Oh, yes.
Mrs. Pintarelli,
Yes.
Mrs. Rothenberg,
Yes.
Mrs. Sanande,
Yes.
Mr. White,
Yes.
and Mr. Rossini.
Okay, yes, and then our regular meeting will again start about 7 o'clock.
Yes.
All right, thank you.